Shalom Alechem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you. Welcome to 1 Samuel chapter 23. We have 29 verses. In verse 1, it says here, they rob, they trample on the threshing floors. These are two separate crimes that are committed. Versus rob the threshing floors, one crime, and that is robbing leftover crops. Verse 3, after the spoils. Shall we go after the spoils versus against the armies? So we're going to go plunder, or are we going to fight men, soldiers? Verse 5, an omission of they fled before him. Okay, so the Philistines fled from before him. They did not do that in the Masoretic, apparently. Verse 6, they fled to David. Abiathar did. Fled to David versus, and he went to Keilah. So it says Abiathar fled to David, that he went down with David to Keilah. So he met David wherever he was, fled to him, and then they both went down together to Keilah. Versus Abiathar fled to David, who was already in Keilah. Okay, verse 9. Big difference, the first one in this chapter. It says here, David knew that Saul spoke openly of mischief against him, versus David knew that Saul secretly practiced mischief against him. So one is open, out in the open, and the footnote for the Greek says Saul was not silent. He was not silent, emphasis on the not, concerning David. But here in the Masoretic, he was doing this secretly. You could say even possibly silently, not openly anyway. So that is a big difference, where Saul is blatantly speaking openly against David, speaking openly of mischief against him, versus secretly practicing mischief so nobody would know about it. No, he's making a public display of this. Verse 11, another big difference, the second one. It says here, will the place be shut up? So David is seeking counsel of Adonai via Abiathar, the priest. And his question is, will, in brackets, the place be shut up? Okay, verses in the Masoretic, will the men of Keilah deliver me up into his hand? So two different things. Because the footnote in this verse, shut up means to be besieged, to be surrounded. So will the city be surrounded, besieged, versus will the men of Keilah betray me? Two different situations there. Another big difference, it says here in the same verse, Adonai Elohim of Israel, tell your servant, this is David speaking, and then Adonai said, it replies to David, it will be shut up, it will be besieged. What does the Masoretic say? What does Adonai say? He will come down. Okay. Saul will come down. That is not the same answer as the city will be besieged. Verse 12. We have a big difference. It says here, they will deliver you up. So this is actually, the whole verse is a difference because this was added. And the footnote doesn't really say whether this was included in the Alexandrian, doesn't say. So we're just going to assume right now, from the information we have, that this whole verse was added. Let's read it. Then said David, will the men of Keilah deliver me and my men into the hand of Shaul? And Adonai said, they will deliver you up. So not only will Saul come down, but he will also, or I should say Keilah, the men of Keilah will deliver you up. So those are two differences from simply the Septuagint saying the city will be besieged. Verse 13, we have a discrepancy of numbers, 400 men with David versus 600 men. He has less men in the Septuagint, 200 less, about a third less. Verse 14, another, actually I should say a significant difference. It says, and he dwelt in Mazaram. I believe this is David. They went forth from Keilah. It was told David, and he dwelt in Mazaram in the wilderness. So this is David living in the wilderness of Mazaram, in the narrow passes, or in the narrow, and dwelt in the wilderness in Mount Ziph, in the dry country. So wilderness means desert. Versus David abode in the wilderness in strongholds, not in Mazaram, and he remained in a mountain, not in a wilderness. So he was not in the desert, he was in the mountain. But that mountain is in the wilderness, in the desert of Ziph, not a mountain of Ziph. So, okay, well, it seems to be saying the same things, just a little, the words are arranged differently. In the dry country, okay. So the dry country is kind of omitted there. Doesn't describe it as a dry country. And then it says dry country versus mountain, okay. But to be fair, it does say Mount Ziph, which is technically a mountain. Next, we have verse 15. David perceived that Saul went forth versus David saw. So he perceived it versus actually seeing it with his own eyes. So he had an instinct that was telling him this was what Saul was doing. And then we have here the dry mountain in the new Ziph versus the wilderness of Ziph, not in a dry mountain, but in a wood, in a forest. Continuous difference in verse 16 of Sayin or Kayin versus in the wood. Verse 17, I shall be second to you. So this is Jonathan speaking to David. I shall be second to you versus next to you. Verse 19, there's an omission of came up out of the dry country. And then another omission in Mesara. Mesara, it's described in the narrows, in Kayin or Sayin, in the hill of Echela, which is on the right of Jessamon, versus not using the name Mesara, but saying in strongholds in the wood, not in the narrows, and not using the name Sayin either, in the hill of Hachila, which is on the south, so not on the right, but on the south of Jeshimon, not Jessamon. Okay, verse 20, we have a big difference, another one. It says, we have shut him up into the hands of the king. So perhaps this is a callback to verse 11. So let's look at verse 11 quickly. What does that say? It will be shut up. That's what Adonai said. Okay. And then so we have confirmation. They just said here in verse 20, we have shut him up. We've besieged him into the hands of the king, essentially. So this is the Ziphites saying this. And if we rewind again back to 11, who are these people? They're not the Keilah. They're not the ones of Keilah. They are of Ziph. Interesting. So he went forth from Keilah, and he went to Ziph. So these are not the same people. That's why the Masoretic is false in saying that the men of Keilah will deliver him. It's not the men of Keilah. According to verse 20, it is in fact the men of Ziph. The Ziphites are the ones who besieged him, King David. Even in the Masoretic, it says the same thing. It doesn't say the ones of Keilah besieged King David or David. It was those of Ziph. Okay, verse 20. In the Masoretic, it doesn't say they shut him up. It says, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand. So that is a callback to verse 12, perhaps. So verse 12 says, they will deliver you up. So again, this is trying to confirm what was at least not included in the Septuagint in verse 12 there. Verse 21, grieved on my account, versus compassion on me. Okay, verse 22, notice his place, and notice his place where his foot shall be. Quickly, in that place which you spoke of, lest by any means he should deal craftily. Verses, and see his place where his haunt is, and who has seen him there. For it is told me that he deals very subtly. Okay, so what are the differences there? First, I want to define haunt is a place that is habitually frequented. So let's read this one more time. It hasn't really registered to me. Notice, so this is the instructions. So these are the instructions of Saul, I believe to the Ziphites, regarding David. So go, I pray you. So please make preparations yet, and notice his place where David's foot shall be. Okay, see his place where his haunt is. So not where he is habitually frequenting, but where his foot will be. So find where his location is quickly in that place which you spoke of. So not quickly. Who has seen him there? Okay. No, where you see him, not where someone else sees him. Lest by any means he should deal craftily. For it is told me that he deals very subtly. So he's saying, don't give him the opportunity to deal craftily. Versus, well, this is why you should do it, because he deals subtly. It was told me this by rumor, by someone else. But no, King Saul knows him in terms of his ability to be crafty, to be clever, and so on. Verse 23, take notice then and learn, and I will go with you. Okay, verses, see therefore and take knowledge of all the lurking places where he hides himself, and come you again to me with certainty when you're sure. So that is a big difference. It's just a lot more information than Masoretic versus the Septuagint saying, okay, so notice and learn, find out, perhaps, reconnaissance, recon, and I'll go with you. So I'll go with you afterwards versus, so take knowledge, okay, so it's similar about learning, where he hides himself and come you again to me with the certainty. So be sure, with the certainty I will go with you. So he will go with him in both instances, in both translations. Verse 24, the Ziphites arose and went before Shaul. Versus they arose and went to Ziph. Okay, why would they go to Ziph? He's not in Ziph, is he? He is in another place, isn't he? In Syene? He's in Mesara and Syene, so he's not in Ziph. Unless technically he's in the Mount of Ziph. Okay, so he went in the dry mountain in Ziph. And Jonathan rose and went to David to Syene. Okay, so I'm not sure if that's the same place. So the Ziphites said, David is not hidden with us in Mesara, so he's not in Ziph. He's in another place, Syene. So again, they didn't go to Ziph, according to verse 24. They didn't go to Ziph. It's in Syene. Okay. They went to Ziph westward to the right. So the wilderness of Maon is westward to the right of Jessamon versus in the plain on the south. So not on the right, but beneath it. Verse 26, David was hiding himself in order to escape from Saul. That's the reason why he hid himself. Versus David made haste to get away, not to escape, but because he was afraid, for fear of Saul. That's the reason why he hid himself, according to the Masoretic. Verse 28, the divided rock versus Selah Amalekoth. 29 could simply be a translation of that. Narrow passes versus strongholds. Okay, so narrow passageways versus a stronghold, a secure fortress, perhaps. Okay, so that's all for this chapter. It was a little bit longer than the previous one. Thank you very much for your time. I hope that is helpful to you in understanding this narrative. We can get a sense of how these differences mount up. But until next time, I bid you all Shalom Aleichem, Assalamu Alaikum, Irini Mazisu, Pax Vobiscum, peace be unto you, and Maranatha.